Hey there, and welcome to the 31st episode of the Wholistic Greatness Podcast. I'm your host, Claudine Phillips. I am so glad to have you here today because I have a very special guest talking about something very delicate, depression. I really am glad you're here. There is a reason why you're listening to this podcast today.
I want every one of your listeners to just feel encouraged and feel good today. They're good at the core of who they are. They're just good. God looked at us and said, "Is very good." And he's never quit feeling that. In the deepest, darkest parts of our mistakes, our sins, our depression, our struggles, our brokenness, he has never wavered from "we are good."
Do you recognize that voice? Yes, that is Chad Bruegman, and he is here on the Holistic Greatness Podcast today to talk about something that he's been struggling with most of his life called depression. And it is not lost on me that you guys are here because you knew that this was all about depression and that maybe you might be struggling with it, or you have been told you are struggling with it, or that you have a loved one that is struggling with depression. No matter what, I am so glad you are here because Chad has such wisdom to share with you. His authenticity and his transparency about his story will encourage you. I hope that you are inspired to get help if you need to get help, or to share this episode with someone that you think might be struggling with it because they will find encouragement. And I know that you know that my last episode was 2 months ago, and this episode is dear and near to my heart because I struggle with depression as well. And back in October, the cloud came and it sat and it sat and it sat. And finally, it's cleared its way. And I feel like I have open skies again. And I've had to just take a break. And what a better episode to jump back into podcasting than to truly talk about this disease, especially this time of year when so many of us are struggling with depression, but we're afraid to talk about it, or we feel very alone. We feel like we're the only ones that are struggling with it. And that's why I brought this particular episode to you guys to end our first season, as well as to launch you in to better health in mind, body, and spirit. And Chad is the perfect person to bring us into the new year. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to Chad if you've not met him. This is Chad Bruegman. He's an amazing speaker, and you will be so inspired for his love for your heart and for Jesus. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's my honor. Absolutely.
And especially thank you for joining us to talk about depression, which is not necessarily a topic that we all gather around our coffee cups to talk about.
Right. It's not the most exciting and exhilarating talk that you're going to have on your podcast, but super necessary. And so I'm actually super honored to talk about this side of my story.
Would you mind telling us a little bit about who you are so that people that may not know you, which is unbelievable to me, but if there are like one or two people in this world that don't know about you, would you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Absolutely. And I'll just start by saying to whoever's listening in your audience, thank you for listening. And I'm super honored that I get to spend a little time talking with you, and I don't take it lightly. And so I'm just trusting people are going to be like blessed and hopefully inspired and encouraged through all this. That said, my name's Chad Bruegman. I am the father of 4 amazing children, 3 pets, and I have my beautiful wife, Rachel. We've been married 16 years, and it's getting better year by year. And I love that I get to report that. She's an incredible woman. And so that's my life right now. It's chaos. We have 1 teenager and 2 kids in elementary and 1 kid who is currently at preschool. And so life for us is just an endless, about every hour we have an injury, a fight, we laugh hysterically, and then we repeat. And that's pretty much every hour. And so I have constant bags under my eyes now. Part of it's age and part of it is just 4 kids.
I think one of my most favorite stories I heard you tell when you were at Red Rocks was when you were announcing that you guys were having a fourth child, and you said, it's kind of like this, and correct me if I'm wrong. It's like you're swimming in the middle of a pool and someone throws you a newborn.
And to be fair, I got that, and I'm pretty sure I gave credit in the sermon. I got that from a comedian named Jim Gaffigan, who I was actually at his show when he said that, and he has 5 kids. We were dying laughing because it's absolutely true. Imagine yourself drowning and someone hands you a baby.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. We kind of feel that way. We had a surprise baby. And he was only our third, but it did feel like that because we had this good rhythm going with the other 2. And then this little guy comes along 10 years later and we're like, oh, okay.
Well, we got, and I know I'm off topic here, but I think we got duped. Everyone told us 3 is the magic number. If you have 3, you can have 6. Because once you learn how to have 3, then everything beyond that, it just gets easier.
So is it true?
Not at all. No, totally duped. And I literally, when we were talking about having a 4th, I literally boiled it down to that. I'm like, well, hey, we've already done the hard work. We've had our 3. Let's
Who are
have
those people?
Kid. Let's
Who
have
are
a
those people?
kid. Yeah, and Cruz, our littlest, is maybe the hardest kid we've had yet. And so, to everyone that told me
Indeed.
that, you're on my list. So.
I think we're in the same boat in the regards to the hardest kids so far. And I think it's because I'm not as particular, like as the firstborn. I mean, I peeled her grapes. It was ridiculous. And then this guy, he's eating sugar at 6 weeks old. It just doesn't matter.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah. So thanks for sharing about a little bit of background. So were you raised in a family of believers? Now, I mean, you're a pastor, so I would assume, hey, these are all believers and I'm going to become a pastor one day. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. My mom and dad are some of my heroes in the faith. And I don't just say that, because it's obligatory because they're my parents. They literally are heroes in the faith. From a spiritual discipline side, my mom is what I want to be when it comes to prayer, time in the Word, the way her and God correspond and the relationship they have. And then the way my dad walks with people has shown me what it's like. My mom shown me how I think Jesus would love us to pray. And my dad shown me how I think Jesus would love us to treat people. And they both do the other well as well. But man, I have incredible parents. So I have an incredible faith.
Did you know this as a kid, though? Did you know that your parents were amazing when you were in those teenage 20s?
I don't know if any parents are that amazing in your teenage years. I just think teenagers are too smart. Like I tell people, if you don't know what to do in life, come ask my 14-year-old. Exactly what you're supposed to do. So
Yes.
no, I didn't realize it honestly until I was adulting and I was married and I had real bills. And then it went to a whole nother level of appreciation when I had my first kid. Because the minute you have a kid, you realize how gray some of life is. When, I said at Red Rocks all the time, I used to be an amazing parent.
Before kids.
And then I had a kid.
Yes. Oh, Chad and I say that all the time.
Yeah. I was so self-righteous, so judgmental. Any parent having any problems with any kid in any store, I just had an instant solution, and I had judgments over those parents. And then you have a kid and you just learn what the word grace really means.
Yes.
So yeah, my parents are heroes to me. And so I have an incredible faith journey. As a teenager, I went prodigal, as we would say in the church world. So all the people listening, in the church world, they know what that means. I went prodigal. I really was not rebelling against my parents. I was rebelling, I think, against I don't even feel like it was rebelling. I felt like it was literally this, like, God, give me my money, I'm going to go figure out life on my own. Like I need to go and I need to put everything to the test. And I need to prove that what I've been told is right and what I've been told is wrong. What I've been told is good and what I've been told is bad. I need to go and prove that to myself. Really find truth and to really find God, or to even see if I want to believe in God. And so what I did by default was really distance myself from my faith. I got super busy in sports and I was incredibly social and extroverted. And so, I just kind of left the church. And I also had a weak understanding of grace.
Mm.
And I think my parents sometimes blame themselves, and I've told them over and over,
Mm.
I don't blame them. It was not a thematic element of my church experience in the late 70s, early 80s, even into the early 90s. It was just not a strong part of God's character I heard taught. And so
Mm.
I just was always under the impression, man, I don't obey good enough for God to probably want to hang out with me. And so I'm going to do him a favor and not play games. And I'm going to leave him alone. And I
Mm.
really regret that. That's the
Mm.
one thing I've fought so hard to dig deep into the hearts of my children is the
Mhm.
message of grace and the message
What
that
is that message? What is your understanding of grace?
my understanding of grace is that at the core, deepest level of who we are as human beings, we are good. And I grew up with the first message being, I think what some church organizations and denominations call total depravity. The first thing I heard was how bad we were. And I'm not discounting that sin is real and that we are fallen creatures. I believe that. That's a part of my active theology. But if we're going to read the Bible start to finish, the very first message out of God's mouth is just everything is good.
Mhm.
And at the fundamental core of who my kids are and who I believe I am and who I believe you and your listeners are, is we are good.
Mhm.
And it is the deepest, most purest part of our DNA. And it has been lost and it has been hijacked by this other thing called evil and by sin. And so
Mhm.
I want my kids to know that at the core of their identity, they're good. And that to get us back to that place where we can be that, it takes grace. It takes a gift of God, a fundamental act of God on his gracious behalf
Mhm.
to intervene into the evil in this world and the sin in our hearts and say, I have something better and bigger for you.
Mhm.
And you never lost it, but I had to come show you how to regain it. And I did that in this person of Jesus Christ.
Wow.
I not even just his death and burial and resurrection, which is essential, but his life, how he
Mhm.
lived, the rhythm of his grace that he walked in and that he treated people with, the way he went to the most marginalized people
Mhm.
and the people that had been discounted and called evil and called sinful. He went right to them. He didn't bat an eye. He looked them straight in the eyes and
Mhm.
he showed them love. And
Mhm.
it was scandalous and it got him in trouble and it made religious people mad. And that's the
Mhm.
grace I want
Mhm.
my kids to know about.
Mhm.
So I want them to have to do a whole lot more than I did if they're going to run from God.
Mm. One of the things I love about you is that you have this incredible, I believe, a God-given gift of clearing the path for people. And how you do that is you use your own personal experiences with the wisdom and the love of God. You couple that together, and then you just share your ever living heart out whenever you can.
Right.
And you have just made such an impact for our family and I know our church. And there is just absolutely no words really to say of how profound you are up there on that stage. It's as if I am sitting there, like how you were just speaking right now. This is how you speak up on stage. Have you always known that you had this gift as you were traveling through this weak understanding of grace and you were walking through that depravity? Did you know that you had this gifting?
I had zero idea. Um, I did not try to become a communicator. Uh, it was not on my it was not on my boards at all. I did not see it coming. I got thrusted into it. I feel like everything, and I'm not saying God works this way with everyone, but
Mm-hmm.
everything in my life that has came looking for me versus me trying to go look for it is what God has blessed. And one of the things that came looking for me was this whole speaking, preaching, communication thing. I didn't see it coming. I didn't want
Mm-hmm.
it. And it was literally, and I won't go into the details, but in my 20s when I gave my life to Christ and I surrendered my life fully to Christ and
Mm-hmm.
sold out for him, for lack of a better term,
Mm-hmm.
um, I got these incredible opportunities to
Mm-hmm.
start talking to literally thousands and thousands of kids all across the United States. And I was basically starting out sharing my testimony with them. And
Mm.
talking about some of my difficulties and their difficulties.
Mm-hmm.
And before I knew it, I found myself then starting to learn how to preach and
Mm.
read the
Would you
Bible.
mind sharing a little bit about your testimony, just a little bit? So we went from a loving, believing family that raised you so well to this time of discovery and understanding what grace really was, to preaching to kids and having the opportunity. What was the bridge between that lost time to kind of finding footage in your life?
I think, well, so when I went prodigal, it was probably starting to happen. It was still fairly innocent, but I was starting to, I would say it this way, about the exact same time I was getting just old enough to start having my first questions about our faith, the faith that I was borrowing from my parents, because we're always
Mhm.
borrowing faith from our parents till it becomes
Mhm.
our own. About the time I was having those faith questions and doubts and critiques, whatever, I started liking girls.
Mhm.
I got introduced to beer, and then a couple other things. The typical stuff, marijuana, stuff like that in high school. And I started getting popular, which is incredibly intoxicating when you're at a really awkward, formidable age.
Mhm.
Uh, I had so many things going against me, but this one gift I had was everyone liked me.
Mm.
And part of being popular and the intoxicating nature and wanting to hold on to something that gave you identity
Mm.
was I kind of had to set some social standards. And a lot of it for the people I was hanging around had to do with drinking. It had to do
Mhm.
with your relationships with girls. And so
Mhm.
everything in my life was, without even really meaning to, it was starting to go in a completely destructive path. And then you get into college, you get into my early 20s, and I just, by default of really getting bored
Mm.
with the lifestyle,
Mhm.
I went to the next gear.
Mm.
You can only do that so long. I think the Bible even says, sin is fun in the beginning or for a season, but in the end it leads to death.
Mm.
And by God's grace, and I really mean it when I say grace, in my early 20s, I was starting to do enough of that stuff that I was tasting the death in it.
Mm.
And I was starting to feel incredibly, which I know is why we're talking today, incredibly depressed. And I
Mhm.
had more friends
Mm.
than I needed. I had, from a material perspective, not only everything I needed, but I had a bunch more. I had an active, great social and dating life. People loved being around me. If you would have asked anyone about me, they would have been shocked to find out that I was in private despair and depression.
Mm.
But it was just getting worse and worse. And so my drugs of choice were getting bigger and more often. And I'm
Mhm.
sitting there, and I literally had a night where I had been out at a college sorority party with some fraternity guys, and we had been drunk, we had been high, and I got home at like 2 a.m, and I would normally just pass out and go to bed. It was a Saturday night, and I literally sat on my chair all
Mm.
night, didn't sleep, and thought about my life.
Mm.
And I thought about my parents' life. And this was really interesting. I thought to myself, man, I'm probably as cool as I'm ever going to get, according to the world's definition of cool. I'm probably as cool as I'm ever going to get in my life.
Mm.
And my parents, who couldn't be less cool at this point in their life, probably are way happier than I am.
Mm.
And I knew the answer as to why. And they would unapologetically say, it's our faith. Like, life is great for us. It's not easy, it's not perfect, but it's great for us because of Jesus. And I
Mm.
knew that. I didn't have to call him, I didn't have to ask him. And so
Mm.
I stayed up that whole night, and I just got in my car. I cleaned up, I got in my car, sobered up, and I went to church.
Mm. Was
And
this a church that friends were going to? Was this a church that you just saw? Was this a family church?
my brother was interning there,
Mm.
studying to be a pastor. It
Mm.
was super, kind of like Red Rocks back in the day, a super fun, fast growing young church.
Mhm.
I knew tons of people there, but the people I knew there knew I didn't really ever go to church, and that I wasn't living a life for Christ at all.
Mm.
And I just went there, and I don't remember the sermon. I don't remember the songs, but I just remember going, I am going to draw a line in the sand today. And I knew it was a church where they asked you if you wanted to receive Jesus.
Mhm.
And I just said, I think Jesus was with me all along,
Mm.
but I needed to make a
Mhm.
declaration. I needed to draw a line in the sand.
Do you mind if we go a little bit deeper into the thoughts of depression during that time that you said you were experiencing it? Did you know it was depression, or did you think, I'm just not getting enough sleep, or I'm just kind of sad?
No, I thought back then, I wouldn't even have used that word.
Mm,
Um, I just thought it was my lifestyle. I had enough old school church upbringing to think part of the piece of the depression was conviction of the Holy Spirit,
mm,
like his kindness not allowing me to be fulfilled.
mhm,
I'd like to think, I won't know till heaven, but I'd really like to think that was part of it. It was like God's grace on me. It was,
mhm,
God disciplines those he loves.
mhm, mhm,
And no discipline is fun at the time. I look
mhm,
back on that and go, God was not letting me enjoy that,
mhm,
bring me home.
mhm. That's good. And
And
being raised in the mindset just of what you heard, not maybe it wasn't even said, but it's what you heard was that you are inherently bad. And
yeah,
so was that part of it?
that was a huge part of it, because the more my lifestyle got out of control, the more I would compare that next to what I had grown up being taught about God and morality. And I just was like, man, I'm not a good person. And but yet I felt like, again, like I said earlier, at the core, I was like, I really think I'm a good person, but I'm
Mhm,
not living a good life. And that was super depressing. And then I
mhm,
also think, looking back and knowing what I know now that I didn't know then physiologically, was you can't do a whole bunch of drugs and it not affect the makeup and the chemistry of your brain. And so I would
mhm,
give a little credit to that.
mhm,
Doctors, would have to tell me more specifically. And I'll never know, but I'm quite sure that the drugs had also something to do with exacerbating the depression.
mhm,
So all that said is, I think it's what I think depression is for a lot of people. It's a mixed bag of
mhm.
spiritual, chemical, physiological, and mental. I think it's
Yeah.
all three.
It's refreshing to hear you say that. I did hear someone recently say, that person keeps saying they're depressed. If they would just pray, they would be fine. If they would just believe in Jesus, they would be fine. Don't they know that? And of course, my heart just like imploded. And how do you address something like that? Because it sounds like you feel like it's more than that.
Yeah, I first of all, even when you just gave that example, I felt like tension in my neck, like
Yeah, that's
like
why my heart imploded.
yeah,
Yes.
PTSD from those statements, because
Yeah.
it is such. And I just, especially for any of your listeners that happen to be in a season right now, wherever it's at on the spectrum of depression, whether it's a Christmas funk, or whether
Mhm.
you have some deep issues with mental health, I want you to understand that that's never acceptable language. That's like me looking at someone my mom has chronic migraines from an accident that almost killed her when I was a
Mm,
little kid.
mm,
She had she was on a 10-speed bike, and she fell off and flew into a old school wooden telephone pole and literally almost died. And she's had severe migraines for decades now. And
mm,
that's, to me, like going up to my mom and saying,
mhm,
you just have to pray better,
mm,
or you haven't quoted the right or enough scriptures over your migraines yet for God to do what God's supposed to do for you to be free from these migraines. I would put my mom's spiritual life and the purity and the beauty of it, I would put it up against anybody's. And I'm like,
mhm,
if she still has migraines, this is not because she hasn't jumped through the right proverbial, spiritual hoops. And so, to
mhm,
everyone struggling with depression, that is an unacceptable statement, because
mhm,
there are so many factors that go into depression. And it is such an unhelpful statement, because I've next to met anybody that hasn't prayed and doesn't want God to help them with their depression. And I've seen people get some incredible freedom from depression, and
mhm,
I've seen some people live with it for decades.
mhm.
And and if we're, and if you play the who's the most godly game, then what I've seen and witnessed, it doesn't add up.
No. Mm-mm. And there are so many lies that go with depression. Like if you are experiencing depression and you think maybe you're the only one, or maybe there's something wrong with me. Like maybe I'm just not working out enough or eating healthy enough, or maybe I'm not praying enough. Like we talked about, like there are so many lies that go with that. And I think one of the lies that we, really hang on to is I'm the only one, because I think that keeps us in this place where the devil really wants to keep us, is in this isolation. And as long as he can keep us isolated, he can keep us entrapped, in this thought process of not being able to reach out for help. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Did you feel like you were the only one? Do you have a family history of depression where you guys have talked about it or not?
Yeah, well, we don't know my dad's side because he was a product of a one night stand. And so biologically, we have no clue what's going on over there. A little bit on my mom's side. So there's definitely a little bit of a lineage and a history that plays some part in it, for sure.
Did you feel alone when you were experiencing this transition from the party life to, I think I'll go to church and figure this out, like something needs to change?
I felt super lonely for a season. No one's fault but my own. But I had to disconnect from the lifestyle. And so by default at that age and phase of life, and I wasn't mature enough to know how to disconnect from the lifestyle and not disconnect from almost all my friends. So much of our friendship was centered around the lifestyle that I came to find out over the years that those didn't last anyways, because once the lifestyle was gone, the friendship wasn't built on anything much stronger than that. I did have a few friends that I had to leave for a while that were still great friends. And I would later go on to tell them a bunch of sorries because I felt like I kind of abandoned them a bit, but I felt like I was fighting for my life. And I just wasn't. So yeah. But the what you said earlier is perhaps not the only one, but perhaps the greatest lie that depressed people have to fight through and find ways to not buy into, is this idea that you're on an island, that you're alone. And this is why I love doing podcasts like this. Of course, I'd love to come and talk about a happier subject. Of course, there's way more interesting and fun things to talk about. But the reason I get so passionate about this issue is because isolation fuels depression. And when it's coming at you biologically or spiritually or chemically or for whatever reason, mentally, the last thing you need is it to be fueled by something that shouldn't even get a voice, because you're already having to take care of it. And all the other factors with the medicine, with the prayer help, with all the things we do holistically to help depression. I hate that this fuel of isolation is still combating it and coming after it. And that's why everywhere I go, I'm more than willing to tell my story, especially as a pastor, because I'm supposed to set the standard of having it put together, right? My soul's supposed to be intact at a level that no other soul is, because I'm the guy up front talking about God and how we should act towards God. And I just know that's true. You've lived enough life to know that pastors are as broken and as human as anyone else. And so
I don't know about you, but when someone is broken, I will listen to them all day long because they have walked the walk. They've walked through the struggle and the isolation of thinking I'm the only one, to, like you said, the biggest fight, the fight of your life, like you knew something had to change, and then having to completely do a turn on your heel and go the opposite direction, leaving your people behind, the people that you did life with. And then here you are standing alone, believing that a change needed to happen, but you had no idea even probably where to begin. Is that what you felt?
yeah, I just felt overwhelmed. And by God's grace, I moved at my brother's request. I moved out of state just to get out of my environment. And I went up to a church, a big church in Illinois. And they had this incredible 1-year program of discipleship. And I didn't even really know what that meant at the time. But basically, I just spent a year learning how to pray, falling in love with the Bible. I didn't date we couldn't date for a whole year to just keep that distraction away, which was really great for me. And I started to work on these. So that was a gift from God that I got out of that
Right.
And I started making some incredible friends who were all heading in the same direction with Jesus at the center of our friendships. And those are friends that were in my wedding, friends that them. We started church together in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a gift.
I personally have struggled with depression, and I know that I probably was in it for years before I was really willing to go, something isn't right. It was almost like I felt like I needed to shake it off. Like, I just got to shake it off, like something, whatever. I'm just going to go. For me, it was, I'm just going to take care of myself better. I'm just going to pray more. I'm just going to do all the things that I think I should be doing. And I'm really not going to tell anybody about it because I didn't want to burden them. And I think you and I have talked about how we're both Enneagram 1s, and we tend to want to be perfectionists. Like we don't want to burden others with our stuff, like we're fine. We can figure this out. We have the ability to figure it out, so we're going to do this on our own. Did you have any of that while you were transitioning?
Yeah, I absolutely did. I've changed a lot as I've gotten older because I did it wrong enough to see the futility in trying to do it on your own. But as you said, as an Enneagram 1, and I'm a 9, I have a 9 wing. And so not only do I have the perfectionist problem going with me, but then I want peace at all costs. And in my misunderstandings of depression, I thought I'm taking peace from other people by having to share this obnoxious, melancholy, sad burden with me. Especially when a bunch of your friends are eternally optimistic and they're 7s on the Enneagram, because 1s are wannabe 7s. That's what we want to be.
Yeah, I was just telling Chad that this morning. I'm like, I really wish I was more of a 7. I just want to have more fun.
Literally, when I took the test the first time, my wife finally demanded I take it years ago because she was totally an Enneagram nerd, and I took it and I was a 1. I'm like, what's that? And she's like a perfectionist / reformer. And I didn't mind the reformer, but I got mad at the perfectionist, and I started reading all the numbers, and I'm like, oh, I like 7. What do I got to do to be a 7?
Yes.
Just tell me what I got to do and I'll do it. And she's like, it doesn't work that way. But I have to be around 7s because of my depression. Like, they make me better.
Mm-hmm. But I have a weekly walk date. Like, we hike every Thursday, and she is a 7. And it truly is a highlight of my week. I love being with her.
Yeah. I just gravitate to the people with the 7 type personalities that lean that way because I get a picture of what could be when I'm healthy, because 1s look like 7s when they're healthy. And I didn't mean to get this into the Enneagram.
I know.
But yeah, it's super difficult because you want to handle it all on your own. You want to even have the appearance a lot of times of perfectionism, and everybody thinking you have everything, all your ducks in a row. And then just the pride. For me, I can't speak for everyone with depression, but for me, the pride of not wanting to bother people. I didn't have as much pride when it came to being embarrassed to say I struggle with it. I feel graced to tell people I struggle with it. Where I felt tons of pride though was I can't burden anyone with this.
And my wing is a 2, and my thought process was, so I tend to be more of, I don't want people to see, the imperfect part of me, but It was also, I didn't want people to see that I wasn't right.
Yeah. And I'm sure as a 2 wing, 2s notoriously help others. And a lot of it's noble, but the unhealthy side of it is helping to deflect from your own stuff.
Amen.
And not being willing to receive the same help that you're so willing to give to other people all the time. And it looks like nobility, and a lot of times it's really just cloaked in, it's just pride of I'm actually helping you to deflect from the fact that I also need help.
And nailed it. That's good. Thank you for my therapy today. I appreciate that.
This is all to my wife, because she is the guru in our house, and she has taught me what I know in the few books that I've read with it. But
she is amazing. So as you're teaching, let's go back to, you're now at the church and you're going through a discipleship program and you're teaching. How long did you carry this sense of depression with you? Like, how long was it with you, and is it still with you today?
Yeah. like I said, started late teens that I can remember. I don't remember as a kid at all. I may have, I don't remember it at all if I did. And then it is carried on, Claudine, till uh, I've had I had a really dark week last week, and nothing happened. I'm not even sure what triggered it. It comes and goes in waves. I had a real sweet season in my 30s where I almost thought it was gone because there were so many. I went the longest period ever without a major bout. Like I know what to do with the little guys. They don't get much energy from me anymore because I just know it's a matter of time. And I know the lies. I know that half of it is just accepting that it's a part of who you are and having the best day you can, knowing it won't be as good as some other days. But man, a couple years ago, I had some different things, which would be for a different podcast for a different time. I had some things in my life that started coming my way that I didn't see and I didn't anticipate. Part of it, even that whole stuff I've joked about at church before, that kind of, I got into my 40s and that midlife crisis that I thought I was exempt from, because guys who pray and read the Bible and who are pastors don't have midlife crisis, right? Because we're too godly for that. And I apparently wasn't, because I really had one. Luckily, by God's grace, I didn't do anything immoral or stupid, but I had an incredible internal conflict. And I think with that, it's really brought a lot of depression back to me. And so I've spent the last couple years really fighting again. In some regards, fighting harder than I've ever fought, because I have kids now. And it's that whole dynamic of, I want them to see me weak sometimes, but I want that to be appropriate. And I want it to be, I don't know if calculated is the right word, but there's things your kids deserve to see in your brokenness, and there's things your kids deserve to be blinded from in your brokenness. And figuring that out is quite a dance of just praying to God for wisdom nonstop. We've talked to our kids, our two older kids, about depression for the first time in the last couple of years. Because I'm walking through a really difficult bout, and we knew they're just getting old enough to know something's different. And so we wanted to give them the grace of putting some language around it and start hearing their dialogue about it. So that's been an interesting journey. But yeah, to answer your question, sorry to make a short answer long. Yeah, I've never been, whatever you want to call it, freed from it, delivered from it.
It is a disease. And if it's not treated like a disease, then it will only grow, right? And it will only get worse. And so my family has a deep history. My grandmother, and we don't know past my grandmother, but and other important family members in my life, they all struggle with it. And so when I started struggling with it, the first thought I had was, not today, Satan. Like, it's not going to touch me. Like, this isn't going to happen to me because I'm different. I walk differently. I'm, I've done a ton of work. I've done EMDR. I've done, talk therapy. I've done all the things. I'm a yoga instructor that works through trauma therapy with your body. I mean, I do all the things, right? But then I was explaining this to Shad, like, it's like a cloud that just sits there sometimes. Sometimes it goes away, sometimes it blows away, but then sometimes it just wants to hang out for a while. And I love how you put it, like the little guys, like I know how to handle the little guys. So I know how to handle the little things. And it's not like I know how to handle them. I really believe that Jesus has really given me the ability to identify what's going on and then to be able to reach out when I'm going through those tough times. But when it wants to hang out, that's the hardest for me, because we still have to function as a parent and a wife and a husband and, an employee or whatever we are choosing to do. We still must function in that place. And it gets to a point where if a listener is in that season right now and is sitting in this place and that cloud is just sitting there, what would you speak into that person's life?
Yeah, I'd say, man, so many things. I want to start with, I think the most important things is just the first reminder about their identity. And I know that's cliched, and of course, and it doesn't help them do better with their kids this week, but I have to start there. I was in Nashville this last week for several days, and it was rainy and cloudy, and I don't do well in that. The whole seasonal depression stuff. That's why I love Denver, is because of the amount of sunshine we get, even in the winter. It's like a gift to me. But we got on the plane to come home, my wife and I, on I think Tuesday, and about 15 minutes into the flight, we got above the clouds, and the vast majority of existence is not cloudy. Above the clouds, it's beautiful. It's blue. Like, we literally in 15 minutes went from 4 days in a row of dreary rain to, as far as my eyes could see, nothing but blue sky and sunshine. And it was just right above those clouds. And it was way bigger than what was under the clouds. Mm-hmm. That part of God's creation. And I was like, that is your identity, is this massive, like this infinite amount of blue sky is who God made you to be. And sometimes, like you said, those clouds feel like it's your story, because it's all you can see, and you can't jump on a plane and get above them. And depression doesn't always give you the right plane to get above those clouds. Sometimes you can find your way up through there. Sometimes, the medicine works, or the exercise or the yoga got you, and you come out of there and you see sun. But there's just some days and some weeks, and sometimes, unfortunately, even months and seasons, where you have to find your peace under those clouds, and in that dreary time. And the way I've done it is, you probably won't have a lot, but key relationships. For one, of course, my wife is, again, a hero to me because of the grace she's shown me from day one since we've been married.
Tell me a little bit. Let's go there with this incredible Rachel. Yeah. Tell me about your relationship with her and how you guys navigate this together. Because I know that there are people listening that maybe don't struggle with depression, but have a loved one that does, and maybe wants to be more there for them. And how is Rachel there for you?
So, it took a while for her to get my rhythm when I'm super down. As it would anyone, because I have a pretty high capacity when I'm doing well and when I feel healthy. And so to see it go from a high capacity person to all of a sudden he doesn't want to return emails, that feels too hard. Mm-hmm. And everyone that struggles with depression knows how debilitating it is. And the degree of how bad you might be currently depressed, you can always tell by how debilitating simple tasks feel. Simple conversations, texting someone back, people inviting you for a fun dinner you'd normally love, and everything in you wants to stay at home and hide, right? Those are great indicators. And yes. Rachel, as we've gotten more mature in our marriage and we communicate better, she understands it better. And then here's what I hate for us depressed people is when you feel debilitated, it looks lazy to everyone else. And one of the most hurtful things you can be called or feel about yourself is lazy, especially when you're not. It's been one of my biggest struggles, but yet, like, basic things are hard to accomplish. And so where she's been amazing is she did this the other day. She calmed me down and said, okay, here's what we're going to do this week. You're going to make a few tasks that are really hard for you and normally really easy. And I'm just gonna help you accomplish those. I'm gonna talk to you about them. I'm gonna hold you accountable and help you. And those are gonna be huge victories. Like you just did something major. Like you just won an election, or you just whatever.
Well, they are
more at work, yeah. And instead of her thinking less of me as a man who's supposed to be a provider and a protector, she is cultivated an understanding to where she knows it's not only best for me, it's actually best in her interest. And I would say to spouses listening that might have a husband or a wife, and they're the ones that you're walking through with their depression, you're actually, if you want to just be selfish about it, you're actually doing yourself a service by, instead of seeing their debilitating kind of slow paced, what could even look lazy or uninterested, seeing that as an opportunity to walk them through and help them. Like my wife accomplish some simple things and celebrate those. And I know it's so counterintuitive when you watch them perform at such a higher level, but it's actually her attitude with me in that has fueled me to even do a little more and go, oh, I can even do a little more. So that's practical. That's super specific.
And that's incredible how you allow her into that, how you've allowed her into your depression and have allowed her to have some control in that for you, and you realizing that you do need to hear someone of sound mind at that moment to be able to help you make some decisions that will help you, like you said, ladder yourself up to above the clouds.
Yeah, she's, like I said, a hero. I can't imagine walking this journey with a spouse that doesn't get it. And if that's you out there listening, I don't have any advice for you other than I just say, I'm with you, I feel you, and I'm sorry. And let me step in for a minute and be the voice that you need, that you're not getting, which is you're going to be all right. You are all right. There is sunshine somewhere above those clouds.
There are relationships that you can reach out to, that you can try to foster when you are in a good place. There's also books. Tell me a little bit more about those things.
Yeah. I think, man, I'm in a constant state of, I don't really read specific books on depression a whole lot more. As I read more now, I try and read stuff about the body. I'm trying to do everything in my control. I cannot control a lot of times how I feel, but I can control what I eat, on most days. Some days I don't. But I do have a responsibility to put the best fuel in my body. So if any part of it's biological or, chemistry driven, whatever the physiological part of it is, I am offering my body an opportunity to heal with the right foods. And I spent so many years eating so poorly, and probably because in my younger years I could get away with it, and not realizing it was all for vanity's sake. However I would eat, it was never about being so that's been huge. Learning about nutrition, learning about supplements, learning about the right kind of vitamins for depression. I've been reading tons lately. Go figure. We're live, and I'm gonna forget.
It's okay.
I just literally took some. Because they're coming out with a bunch of new studies. We produce all glucose in our brain. And so I'm taking, and I never, that's the latest thing I've been reading about and studying. Of course, B12 is a gift from God for people. I'm not even getting into the pharmaceutical side of things because I do believe in that. I know a lot of Christians have done a lot of damage and disservice to other Christians by making them think that if you have God, you don't need that. And I would simply say, that's just not true. It's not fair. It's like you said, it's like diabetes or cancer. You pray to God, you believe God for good things and miracles, and you go to the freaking doctor.
Yes.
Right?
Amen.
Like the doctors and nurses and healthcare is a gift of God, right? We have a term theologically, it's called common grace. It's like, I would call it no-brainer grace. The church fathers called it common grace. I just say like God's up there, like hearing pastors or people in the church over spiritualize depression. And I picture him up there waving his hands like, no. Don't say that on my behalf. Like, go to the doctor. Like the brains that came up with, and I'm not saying every medicine is good for everyone. There's definitely sometimes where that's not, but you have so much grace to figure out what's best for you. And other people, including pastors, including life group leaders, including religious leaders you look up to that are posting things or whatever, you deserve to find out what's wrong with you on your terms. And it is your body, and it is your brain, it is your spirit and heart, and you get to control that. And it's depressing when you're actually driving more depression into people when you're giving them these hyper spiritualized statements and sentiments that do a great disservice to people that are already struggling, because when you're depressed, you're not happy with your faith anyways, even if you're doing great.
Right.
And it just drives you deeper. And so I would just be that opposite voice of saying, you try everything under the sun. And so I read books probably more about physiology than I do about spirituality when it comes to the issue of depression, because I feel like I've been there and done that. I know scripture and verse about it. I know my conviction about how to approach depression spiritually. But what I know way less of, because I've studied as a pastor, not a doctor, is the physics. So I'm super intrigued by all that stuff.
Well, thank you for giving permission to our listeners, about being able to take medication. Yeah, we are in charge of our life. And if it's going to save your life, then by golly, get into the doctor and start talking about it. And it's okay. It is absolutely okay.
Guilt-free. And if it does not work for you, it's okay. You've tried. Keep trying more. Do something else. But nobody gets to have that say.
And then on that note, what are your feelings about psychotherapy?
I am honestly, I could be right or wrong. I'm not saying, but I'm open to it. I am open to anything that will bring life and life to the fullest. And many, many years ago, I quit drawing such a hard line in this, what we call the secular sacred divide, where we're trying to make creation categories, this is secular, this is sacred. And I theologically have a deep conviction that everything was created sacred. And the only way it can become secularized is that it gets perverted. It was good old C.S. Lewis in the Screw Tape Letters that said the enemy, he was, talking about the devil in his metaphor, but he said the devil, essentially, he has zero power to create anything. He only has the power to pervert it. And so psychotherapy can be as godly as it was intended to be by the brains God gave us to understand our nature and our brains and our hearts and our minds and how all of that goes together. And so I'm all about it. Can it get sideways and weird and perverted? And can it become a religion in itself? And can it dismiss the power and the beauty of God? Absolutely. But I just really trust almost everyone that's a believer to know the difference. And maybe I might be soft selling this. I might be wrong. I'm totally wrong. But in my deepest part of my gut, I love it. I'm open to it. I'm thrilled by it. It's been helpful to me. Just consenting with God, like going into therapy, God, like my therapist, we consent with God. No, I don't think God needs our consent to do anything. But I think he's so gentle that when broken, vulnerable people say, God, I give you consent to do whatever you need to do. It's like, like when a doctor has to touch a little kid when they're having their appointment, our doctor would ask us and ask our child when he was doing more intimate things as far as a checkup, he would get permission and consent. He was getting, he needed to do it no matter what, but he was getting consent. So everyone felt more open to a very vulnerable moment being less vulnerable and appropriate. And so I know that sounds, that may be a crazy illustration.
No, it's good.
But I used to say this at church. You probably remember saying this. The God doesn't need our permission to do anything. He reserves the right to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, however he wants. However, the Holy Spirit of God, we're taught in Galatians, is gentle, which means he's a gentleman, and gentlemen don't barge in. And so I give God consent in my therapy to lord over it. My therapist, who happens to be a believer, gives God consent for him to lord over that. But we're still going to do what he learned in the textbooks. He still is going to use his education. He's still going to use EMDR. I had EMDR a week and a half ago, and it's amazing how healing it is. And I feel the Holy Spirit of God when I'm bawling like a little child. In that practice, I feel God's presence. I'm grateful to God for that moment. And I'm grateful to God that we now know what next to no other generations has ever known about something like EMDR and the power of it. And I hope I'm not getting confusing now.
No.
I'm off on a rabbit trail, but
I think overall, like something overarching that I'm hearing you throughout this time that we've been together is that there's just this power of surrender that you have embraced in your life. And through surrendering, you receive power. And the power in all the things, whether it's facing the stuff that we need to face, like stuff that we face in EMDR, whether the power of being able to invite the Holy Spirit into our sessions, the power to be able to say, yes, I'm going to go on meds today, and I don't care what anybody thinks. I don't care what anybody says. This is what I need. Or even the power of just this basically having that place of surrender going, I need help. Just those three words. And just throughout your whole life and what you've shared, you have had that sense of humility throughout your whole life. And it's admirable from on the outside, but I know what I'm going to hear from you is no way. I'm the least humble person in the world. You know, I've heard you say that, but I think your humility comes from your surrender to letting the Spirit lead in all of it.
I hope I will not counter. I'll just receive it because I'm trying to be better at that.
Okay.
And so I really appreciate you saying that about me.
I think we've come to the end of our time, although I could just talk to you forever, Chad, and our listeners could listen to you forever as well.
Well, I'm grateful that you would want to have me on. I'm as passionate as you are about mind, body, spirit, and the wellness and the ultimately greatness that comes with that. I want every one of your listeners to just feel encouraged and feel good today. They're good at the core of who they are. They're just good. God looked at us and said, "It's very good," and He's never quit feeling that in the deepest, darkest parts of our mistakes, our sins, our depression, our struggles, our brokenness. He has never wavered from we are good. And sometimes in the church world, we camp too long on the we are sinful, and I've just chosen as I've gotten older to say, nope. I know you can sit under those clouds for long enough to think that's your true story, but I want to bring people above the clouds where the vast expanse of blue sky and sun is, and that's God's identity, his true identity. And so I hope people feel that today, if nothing else, is that above the clouds of whatever they're sitting under, there's sun, and it's abundant, and it's forever. And this lifetime is difficult and short, and we are going to spend an eternity with no death, no mourning, no crying, no pain, no depression, no struggles, no brokenness. And so this is our time to love each other, treat each other well, hang on to each other, speak life over each other, throw judgment out the door, and just dump grace all over the place until he comes again, or until we breathe our last. And then everything goes back to perfect peace. But until then, we have to treat each other good. And I hope I'm one of those people. I know you are, Claudine.
Thank you. I received that. And thank you for coming to a place of such authenticity and being able to share in probably one of the darkest seasons of your life, Chad. You are good. And we are grateful for you. Thank you.
I receive it.
So grateful for Chad. Just so grateful. If you want to connect with him further after listening to him today, you can find him on Instagram at Chad Bruegman. You can also find him on Twitter on the same handle, Chad Bruegman, ChadBruegman. And if you feel like you need to talk to somebody, and after listening to today, you really need to reach out and you need to ask that simple question, can you help me? There's a number you can call. And if you want it to remain confidential, it's perfectly confidential. So it's the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-8255. It's free. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Give them a call. And last, if you thought of someone during this podcast, whether it's someone who has a dear loved one that's struggling with depression, or if you are thinking of someone that is struggling with depression, share this episode with them or tag them if you need to. Whatever you need to do, get the word out that it's okay and that they are going to be okay and that they are good and so loved. And that just might change the direction of their life. Just a simple reaching out. If you don't want to share this episode and you're thinking, maybe I just need to reach out, like do it. Follow the prompting. Do it. Reach out to them. Do what you need to do to let them know that they are loved. You guys, I love you, and I'm so grateful for you. And I thank you so much for being a part of this amazing first season of the Holistic Greatness podcast. And I look forward to connecting with you on the other side in 2020. And I'd love to hear your feedback. If you want to have more episodes like this, let me know. If you have some ideas, let me know. Anyways, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I love you. Bye.
This information included in this podcast is for educational purposes only. It's not intended or implied to be professional medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice. Listeners should always consult their healthcare providers to determine the appropriateness of the information for their own situation, or if they have any questions regarding medical conditions or treatment plans.